Management instigated workplace violence. Most of the time, I talk about Amazon. I talk about Amazon with high praise. I like Amazon. Um, I ended up working there. Contracts were kind of short duration, and um, just working at Amazon gave at least some stability. Um, so I'd go in, I'd do what I got hired to do. That was to stow products, and it was a hard job, physically demanding. I'd go home sore and tired. Uh, Eventually, I adapted, and wasn't so sore and tired, but it was still physically taxing. But they provided benefits just as good as the civil service when I was a civil servant. Um, Might have even been a little bit cheaper, but then again, I was paying for family insurance then. Now being divorced, I pay just single payer, and I cover my a couple of my kids too. So yeah, I think it's a little bit cheaper. It was a little bit cheaper for some reason. I don't know. Um, but so some of the issues that Amazon does have is you get managers that are really ornery. For the 95% of the managers there are what I would say good people. They're there, they're doing their job, they do try to motivate, they do try to push people. Um, they take the positions that are available, and they help groom and train, particularly younger workers, to grow, help them grow their careers, to get experience that might be useful somewhere else. Um, and for the most part, they're fair, but maybe it's just because it was the night shift. Um, Occasionally, you run into managers that are really overly aggressive. So the two topics are overly aggressive and production above everything else. In fact, my first, not my first supervisor, the first supervisor I had that was my supervisor for more than 2 weeks. Uh, One day I just went up to talk to him, and he just started throwing punches at me. It's like, what? So I stepped back, and taking advice of an ex-girlfriend, I decided to be an adult about it. Go ask him, hey, why were you throwing punches at me? And he said something that reminded me of um, my Merit System Protection Board when I was trying to protect my civil servant job, because I was being essentially fired because after a long period of um, retribution for not signing off on a safety plan that the contractor submitted that was clearly um, not acceptable in terms of what they were asked for. And, he could have submitted a waiver if he thought that a different type of plan was applicable, but he didn't want to do that. Navy didn't want to capture the money that we were paying for him. And uh, it led eventually to a shouting match, which was a basis for relieving me of my civil service career. And he made reference to testimony in that. And so, you know, thus I started writing a book. It brought back to mind all the things that were going on when I was a civil servant. So this was 6, 7, 10 years later, and all of a sudden, I'm still being slapped in the face. It makes me think sometimes that I was blacklisted as well. But and that's why contracts were usually canceled after 3 months, or we ran out of work after 3 months. And what happened? So it's hard for me to know whether this was attributable just to me, or I did see signs of this against other employees for some reason. I don't know. But in my 2.5 years of working at Amazon, I had 5 supervisors that were either threw punches at me or were uh, really, really verbally and physically abusive. If you look at Illinois, they have a clause that defines what verbal abuse is. And this naturally, you know, I'm not trained in combat. Um, I haven't devoted my life to karate. I don't have a black belt or anything like that. I'm not a boxer. And so I don't know if they were doing this because after all my yoga, I look thick and scary, or if they just saw an easy target, or if they were all saying bought into the Navy's nonsense that I had beat up my supervisor. Got right, I beat up a Navy commander with all the physical and combat training that he has. And I'm just a college graduate with an engineering degree. That didn't happen, but they tried to say it did. Um, so another time, now our upper management at Amazon has an open door policy, and so a new supervisor a year and a half later, and this was like the third or fourth incident, I think, says, okay, I don't know who the they was that they were talking about. He obviously wasn't talking about upper management because open management had an open door policy. You can go in and talk to them anytime. He said, something about, well, hey, I don't want you going, I don't want you talking to anybody but me. You go through me. And I said, well, management has an open door policy, so I'm going to reserve the right to go talk to them if I feel the need to. They threw a punch at me. It's like, what am I supposed to do? If I block it away, they're going to say I instigated it. If I get beat up, they're going to say, well, you shouldn't have been fighting with him. It's really a tough situation that some people sometimes have to endure at Amazon with some managers. And so I got five instances of such, and I'm trying to get a report filed with OSHA. I'm getting a clarification because all the industrial hygiene, all the OSHA stuff says is workers. It always puts the emphasis on workers. And in my experience, there's rarely been a thing of work. A couple of people have difference of opinions. They go outside, they get fired, and they get fired. But it seems to give the sense to management personnel that, those laws and those rules don't apply to them. And so I'm trying to get into the national discussion, a debate of workplace violence promulgated, instigated, and perpetuated by management personnel, junior management personnel, thinking they have some sort of executive privilege. So I would encourage anybody who's been treated like this to really hit up your HR department. I don't know, maybe you should get some legal advice, but my efforts with Amazon's human resources department were fruitful. Um, every time there seemed to be some manager directing some guy to go cause trouble with somebody, they put a stop to it. It would start to ramp back up, hit that HR department, file those complaints, make them aware, and by the time um, that manager uh, got around, it had calmed down and it had worked. But I told him this. I said, hey, through nonviolent means, I've been able to improve the working environment by helping to reduce workplace violence by, going to human resources and filing these complaints and getting management to take a closer look at it. He says, "Oh yeah, against two," he throws another punch at me. It's like, what in the fuck? So anyway, I'm trying to get OSHA to address that, to change their wording on their standards and guidelines, and I encourage anybody out there to file a complaint with OSHA. Usually they want you to work through your human resources department, but that might be the best way to go about that, and I would encourage that. But I think sometimes if we don't address issues like that right away, they bud out and become a tree, and the next thing you know it, people are constantly doing this stuff to you, and now you got a situation that it's much harder to deal with. So I would say, yeah, work through your human resources department, work through your upper management. But I think still their interest is in protecting their corporation. and it can do some good, especially if you have a proactive company like Amazon. But you know, I would say that unless people start making things like OSHA and industrial hygiene aware of this, that it's going to stay under the radar, and they need to change their wording. Implicitly, yes, management falls under the same laws, regulations, and standards of behavior. But um, it's easier to address this and get the wording changed and make everybody aware, bring it into the national debate and discussion, than having an individual having to deal with this on his own. And so an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. 100%. Now the second issue had to do with production, but this is a lot longer than most of my ramblings, so I am going to take that up in part 2.